Hey, it looks like we are live once again. My name is Manny Wolf, and I haven't done a solo broadcast in quite some time. I really felt compelled to talk a little bit about, as the title of this broadcast says, the need for a new education model in the time of coronavirus. And it's not so much the virus itself, although that is an important part of my argument that we do need a new model of education. Give me 1 second, and I'm going to share this. Here we go. No, that's not it. What the heck am I doing? I can't remember how to share. That's funny. I'm just totally drawing a blank on how to do this. Okay, well, let's just talk then. I'll do a watch party later. So let me first give you an overview of my experience as this pandemic rolled out. When it first came out, I was probably like many people in the United States. I didn't give it much credence. As it happened in China, and then I saw it spread and spread and spread. And by the time it got here, I started to pay attention to it. By the time our national government and our local governments started to talk about it and the need for safety measures, I got scared, as I'm sure many of us did. And in my fear, without knowing it, this is what's really funny, I retreated to my beliefs. I never questioned my beliefs. I never thought twice about my beliefs. I retreated into them. And we got put on lockdown, and I said, that's a good thing. That's a great thing. And all of my friends on social media, I was without realizing it, I was starting to take sides, as now seemingly all of us have. And that's really the point. That's what I really want to talk about. But so I took sides, and I was feeling like, okay, we've got to do everything we can. Then information started coming out that clearly defined the main narrative by being a different narrative. Does that make sense? In other words, I didn't realize that we had one narrative being driven. I was too busy being scared, frankly, until another narrative came out. And at first, I disregarded that narrative. I thought it was conspiracy theorists and quacks and all of these things. And little by little, I started to try to open my mind up, just because I really didn't like how I felt being so polarized with other people who I care about and who I'm friends with. So I began to sort of open my mind up a little bit. And I don't want to say that in a way that makes it sound like if you are on one side staunchly, you're not opening your mind up. That's not my intention. My intention is just to show you how this situation made me act and think, and that maybe we can learn something from this. I have no pro or con virus, pro or con mask, pro or con testing numbers agenda to push here. So as I started to allow in, I try to live by an axiom, which is neither side on any topic is 100% right or 100% wrong, right? Nobody is the villain in their own story. You've heard that expression before. And so now that there may be times when that's not true, but it allows me to get out of my dogma. If I look at somebody who I don't agree with, and I say to myself, at a minimum, they don't see themselves as the idiot or the bad guy or the villain. At a minimum, they probably see themselves as right. So maybe there's a grain of truth there. And that allows me to get into a more constructive way of thinking. Now, that's what happened as I started to examine what you might call the alternative narratives, the which has now split right into this really, really polarized, you're with us or against us on masks, on testing numbers, on lockdowns, on everything. It's all you're with us or against us. There are very few voices in the middle preaching togetherness. There are very few voices in the middle who are talking about our power to overcome as a population, as a group, as a nation for the US, as a world, as a planet, as a species. And yet we have always, without exception, overcome up until now, without exception. There's a fellow named Alex Sharfin, who's an entrepreneur, who I once heard say that all societies move toward greater and greater democratization and freedom over a long enough timeline. Over a long enough timeline, the societies that don't allow that don't last. So all of that is to say that I've had some really strange things happen. I thought that I was a card-carrying liberal. Now I'm not so sure. I thought that the political right was completely full of sadistic, whack job, wingnut people, right? I thought that that's what they were. Now I'm able to see some truth, some value to both perspectives. Does that make me so great? That's certainly not what I'm trying to imply here. But here's what I want to talk about. Whether it's the right or the left, as long as we're identifying with a dogma, as long as we are being pedantic with trying to sort of either validate or virtue signal our own opinions or sort of shout out the opinions of other people, we are not truly engaged in critical thinking. That's the point I want to make. If there's one thing that I will say that I can do, it is I can engage in critical thinking. I can challenge my own assumptions and be willing to become uncomfortable because I know that getting stuck in one way of thinking or another is not as valuable and beneficial to me or other people as being able to rise above, again, the dogma and the pedagogy of a way of thinking. I know that it's worth more to be able to think critically. Now, I can think critically and draw conclusions that are different from yours if you're a critical thinker. And see, that's what I kind of want to get at is we are made uncomfortable by that idea. We are seduced by an idea of right and wrong. When in fact, the reality of the complexity of the world that we live in is the reality that very, very little falls into pure right and pure wrong. Some things do, but very little. Most of it is a matter of perception and degrees. So why did I call this the need for a new education model in the time of Corona? Well, because the education model that we have today in no way teaches critical thinking. Does that make sense? You don't see it. Well, actually, you see it in kindergarten, oddly enough. And you might see it in first grade sometimes, and you see it in preschool. Isn't that strange? In preschool and kindergarten, they teach critical thinking. But as soon as you get into the grades, it's more and more into learning and rote memorization, which, sure, that's important, but it's not important enough to justify 12 years of it without teaching critical thinking, teaching collaboration, teaching what's called deep learning, teaching what else do we have, like soft skills, teaching the importance of communication, teaching, again, I come back to critical thinking, right? And so this is why I suggest that we need a new education model, not just in the time of Corona, but because of what has been revealed through the advent of Corona. What we've seen revealed through the advent of Corona is profound breakdowns in our ability to think, profound breakdowns in our ability to reason beyond what looks to me to be pretty manipulative, emotionally driven narratives, right? Many of us are not even able to distinguish between the media lens and the information that the media is telling us. I will promise you this, and anyone who can think for themselves will see the truth of this instantaneously. For every one story that the media does show you, there are 1,000 stories that happened that could create a different emotional impact inside of you that they don't show you. In this way, the media doesn't control us, not in the sort of easy way that we think. What it does is it controls what we focus on, right? It doesn't tell you what to think. You've heard that idea that the media tells you what to think. It doesn't tell you what to think. As per Cialdini in his book Persuasion, the follow-up to his landmark book Persuasion, Cialdini states and illustrates how the media only tells you what to think about. But we have a massive bias inside of us that favors what we're thinking about and gives it more gravity and truth. And it's totally arbitrary. But what we see front and center, we ascribe without realizing it as more true than things we don't see front and center. Ask any good marketer, they'll tell you this is the case. Ask any good salesperson. They know some form of this is true. And so what the media does then is it controls what we focus on, knowing that we'll take care of the rest. It doesn't tell us what to think. It tells us what to think about. And you see, the more that we understand how to think critically, how to question our assumptions, how to check in with what we feel and doubt and be judicious skeptics, the less it can do, it being media, can do its job. And I feel as though nobody would argue, no matter what side of this situation you're on, that the media has been a damaging influence. And then the next layer is social media, right? Because social media takes what the media said, which already has its preferred biases. And by the way, media biases are simple. They're doing their best guess at showing you what will get them your clicks and your engagement so that they can sell advertising. Is there some affiliation to politics? Yes, but it's not in the way that you think, typically. So the heads of media empires are not as much saying, we've got to put this person in office, we've got to get this person out of office, as they're seeing, oh, this topic of who gets in or gets out of office gets us clicks, right? So there's some, they know that their viewership leans left or leans right. So their stories show left or show right based on their best educated guesses, which are very good, as to what their viewership will click on. So it's really all about selling ads for the most part. So you can see how the main sources of information that we get have a bias toward their own profit and they know who their viewership is, right? So they want to support what their viewership already thinks. Media basically acts as an echo chamber. And that's why Fox can have such a wildly different interpretation of events as CNN, because they both know who their target is. If we were each of us a better critical thinker, it would diminish their power over us dramatically. If we were each of us a better critical thinker, we might be able to get into the nuance of the mask debate or the shelter in place debate or the any life saved from coronavirus is worth the cost of the economy debate, or really, frankly, any other debate. And so this is where it ties back. And I say that we need a new educational model, because in a way, we are where we are as a society right now. I'm not talking about the external influence of the coronavirus itself, but our reaction to it, the distrust, the animosity, all of those things really stem from not having a high value placed on these soft skills like critical thinking, leadership, communication, all of those things present in our childhoods, in our educations. Had our educations put equal value on these soft skills, these so-called soft skills, as it did on creating good factory workers, compliant factory workers, which is what the public school system does, even though we are literally 2, if not 3 eras of innovation past the Industrial Revolution, right? It is no longer the industrial age. It is no longer the autonomy age. It is no longer the automation age. It is the age of the enlightened worker. It is the information age. So schools are still focused exclusively almost in preparing us to be good factory workers, when in fact what's called for today is our best, thoughtful, judicious, educated look at the future and how to prepare for that. And that future, since it's so unpredictable, what we can know remains unchangeable are these things like critical thinking, communication skills, the ability to collaborate deeply with diverse teams, what's called deep learning, where you learn deeply about a given subject through doing, not through intellectual academic study and fill out tests kind of formats. And so I propose this to you. I suggest this. It's obviously too late to put our generations, the boomers and the millennials, back through school to teach them this stuff. But if there was an educational alternative that focused on critical thinking and problem solving and deep collaboration and things like that, within a couple of generations, we would, in addition to all the other ways that would improve society, not just a few people, but society, it would also weaken the grip and the stranglehold of media and social media over us. This is why I say that there's a need for a new education model in the time of Corona. Please let me know what you think down below. Please share, please comment, please get involved in this discussion with me, and let me know I'm not doing this alone, okay? Thanks very much.